We're back with Shelley Bacon and Todd Stafford of Northern Cables, based in Brockville and Prescott. Truly a Canadian manufacturing success story in the wire and cable space. How much have current Canadian government policies affected your business? Um, uh, have the regulations made it tougher and tougher over time? Todd, let's start
Well,
with you.
yeah, but the current policies, I would say, from a global perspective, don't have a great effect on our business. Obviously, business impediments to operating any business. There's all kinds of red tape and bureaucracy. But in terms of the electrical products and electrical industry, the regulations aren't too bad. Um, there seems to be a bit of an anti-manufacturing perspective in the last 10 years or so from federal and even provincial governments. Manufactured items come into Canada from every country, not just China, but U.S. as well, with no carbon tax on them. So the carbon
Right.
tax is strictly a tax on Canadian manufacturing, which is difficult for us to manage. It's not a continental policy, so it's unfair. Um, in we don't have good trade policies in the U.S. In our industry. Uh, Manufacturers got together and filed a trade complaint with the U.S. government and triggered an investigation into the imports of cable. The U.S. government found that their industry was being harmed, and they put in protective tariffs
Ah,
against Chinese imports. But of course, the Canadian government didn't follow, so now Canada is a home for much more Canadian products because they just moved their production capacity to making Canadian products.
right.
So I think the only way Northern Cables can protect itself, if our government won't, is it forces us to have to look at doing things like that ourselves, trying to get other people in our industry and paying out of our pockets to do an investigation and protect ourselves. But really, inside a USMCA, if one country finds damaged trade, that should apply to the USMCA bloc as a whole. I mean, if we have a unified policy within the three countries, then if one country's proved damage, that should apply to all three countries.
That makes so much sense. Uh, Shelley, to you, recently a candidate in Barrie South Innisfil said this year that Canada should just partner with China and other nations and give up on manufacturing. What do you say to that crazy statement?
I'll tell you, Ves, I was aware of the statement. I actually looked into it a little bit to find out who the person was and what they were saying. And the only comment I can make is a person would make a statement like that is obviously somebody who does not have much attachment to the way the world was during world wars. Let's face it, when you're at war or at odds with an enemy, you don't really call your enemy up and say, "Would you make me some guns and bullets, please? Because we're having a war here. I need to be able to fight you." So clearly, we need to, as a country, a sovereign country, we need to protect our ability to make our goods and services, fundamental goods and services that we all need to operate on a day-to-day basis. And that should be part of our national security, where we say we have to have so much Canadian content or ability to produce these goods and services. That's a foolish statement. We all know it. That's where all the baby boomers used to work in those industries. I mean, that's just nonsense.
I'm often fascinated by how soon we forget. During COVID, we had to rely on all sorts of others for some of the PPE that we needed to protect ourselves. And it came from China, it came from other places. In fact, China was probably sending a lot of our PPE back to China for their use as well. We forget that the world is a very competitive and dangerous place, and manufacturing is absolutely key to self-sufficiency. So I think, Todd, you mentioned manufacturing strategy. Shelley, you've spoken to manufacturing strategy. What do you think we need to do moving forward uh, to uh, to incentivize manufacturing?
We have to stop punishing it.
We have to stop punishing it. How straightforward and simple is that? We have to start punishing it. I know all sorts of businesses that have moved to the United States because they have all sorts of incentives to come down there. We must counter those incentives, and we must, I believe, nurture Canadian business. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Have you seen any of that from our current government?
No.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after the break.